Though you may not have noticed it, humans like you are able to learn biology largely due to natural selection, resulting in increased brain size and cranial capacity in humans. So today, let's learn a bit about natural selection. Natural selection is a non-random mechanism that favors alleles that produce certain phenotypes over others, increasing their frequency in a gene pool. Natural selection causes adaptations that allow individuals to have a better chance of survival. Because evolution is a population-based process, we can compare original and evolved population distributions to determine what type of natural selection has occurred. We can look at bell curves to see this. The null hypothesis is that you have a normal distribution in a population with a high frequency of intermediate traits that decrease towards the extremes. First, let's look at directional selection, which is when natural selection changes the average value of a trait. This occurs when conditions favor one extreme phenotype, and this can sometimes decrease genetic diversity. When looking at the graph, we can see that the curve showing the population after selection has either shifted left or right of the curve showing the original population. In this example, we can see that the curve showing the population after selection has shifted right, showing an increase in the average value of the trait. One example of this is that during the drought, only Galapagos finches with deeper beaks survived, as there were no small seeds available. Stabilizing selection selects against extremes and favors the intermediate value of a trait. This reduces genetic variability, but keeps the average value of the trait the same. When we look at the graph, we can see that the curve showing the population after natural selection is narrower than the curve showing the original population. This demonstrates that fewer individuals exhibit extreme forms of the trait. One example of this is baby birth weight, as babies with very small or very large weights have lower survivorship. Disruptive selection increases representation of extreme phenotypes and their associated low-frequency alleles. So the average value of the trait does not change, but genetic variability is increased. The curve shows that the population after selection has peaks at the extremes, showing that a higher frequency of individuals exhibit the extreme values of the trait. One example of this is black-bellied seed crackers. Small-billed birds specialize on soft seeds, while large-billed birds specialize on hard seeds. Balancing selection is when a variety of selective processes act together. Balancing selection maintains diversity by helping maintain a greater number of different alleles at higher frequencies. This includes both frequency-dependent selection, which is when the fitness of individuals with a certain phenotype is dependent on how rare or common the phenotype is, and heterozygote advantage, which is when individuals with a phenotype associated with a heterozygous genotype, which is one dominant and one recessive allele, have higher fitness levels than individuals with a phenotype associated with homozygous genotypes. One example of this is in juvenile red rock crabs, where they maintain a high variation in shell pattern to reduce the probability of visual predators creating a search image of the crab. Now let's go back to the case study in the beginning of the video. As we can see here, Australopithecus, which is the oldest hominin species, has the lowest cranial capacity, while Homo sapiens, which is the most recent hominin species, has the largest cranial capacity. Overall, we can see an increase in the mean cranial capacity. So what type of natural selection is this, and what would the population distribution look like? This example shows directional selection. So the curve showing the population after selection should have shifted right of the curve showing the original population, which would signify increased mean cranial capacity. So the curve showing the Australopithecus genus should have been to the left, while the curve showing the Homo erectus species should have been shifted to the right of the Australopithecus genus. The curve showing the Homo sapiens species, which is the most current and has the largest cranial capacity, should have been shifted to the right of the Homo erectus species. Because we can identify that directional selection has occurred, we know that conditions in the past favored the extreme phenotype of having a larger cranial capacity in early humans. So how would this adaptation have been advantageous and aided humans in survival and reproduction? Natural selection favored alleles for increased cranial capacity, as larger brains and more complex thought aided in tool use and social interaction, increasing survival rates. Humans' advanced thought processes, allowing the utilization of technology and the creation of the modern world, have stemmed from adaptations due to directional selection for larger cranial capacities in early hominins. To conclude, the various types of natural selection have played an important role in the evolution and continued survival of all species.